Hello and welcome to my shop. My name is George and I'm coming to you from Chelsea, Quebec. Now today's video is a little off base. It's very likely that the project itself is a waste of time, and maybe even watching this video is going to be a waste of your time. So if that turns out to be the case, let me say I'm sorry right away. So what is this video about? Well, I'm going to glue some rips into stacks in order to get laminated quarter-sawn boards from what would otherwise just be firewood. Stick around if you think this might be interesting. So I did some slabbing last year, and when you're slabbing, that first cut is just there to establish a flat surface, and then that first cut becomes firewood. But instead of cross-cutting those lengths into firewood, I decided instead to strip the bark and to keep pieces that were usefully thick. I ripped them this way. So each of these rips would give rise to quarter-sawn material. And then the plan was to make some boards by squaring off the tops and bottoms and then gluing them in stacks. So this would give me boards that were quarter-sawn material from one end to the other. The question on my mind is this a productive exercise? Here are the 6 pieces that I'm going to be working with. They run about 18 inches in length, and the thinnest of them is about an inch thick at its center. So that would be about 25 millimeters thick by about 450 millimeters in length. I've marked lines down the centers to guide the bandsawing. To get these pieces ready for the planer, I'll rip them down the center, and that'll give me a face and an edge that are very roughly square to each other. So here are a dozen pieces ready for the planer. In order to get as thin a kerf as possible, I used a 7 1/4 inch blade in my table saw. That meant that for some of the pieces I didn't cut all the way through, and I had to finish the cut with a handsaw. Where the 7 1/4 inch blade didn't cut all the way through, I finished the cut with a handsaw. The kerf left by the handsaw was thinner than the kerf from the table saw, so the lip that it left behind needed to be planed flush with the table saw kerf. So here are a couple of the boards. Now they've been ripped into equally wide pieces. I'm going to take them, individually flatten the tops, and then for gluing I'm going to orient the pieces like this to make a panel. Now when I do that, I'll probably end up with one of the ends being wider than the other one. And to try to get the ends to be about the same width, some of the boards will get turned around like this. They won't get turned around like this because that will change the run out if there is any. So if the grain is running out this way, you can flip this guy around like this and the grain will still be running out this way. If you flip it like this, the grain orientation will change. And I'm hoping that that's going to help with any planing that needs to be done at the end. So to keep things straight, I'll just mark a corner. And make sure that the mark ends up either here or there. In some cases the tops have a serious angle, so instead of making pass after pass on the planer, I wasted away much of the angle on the table saw. And so it's back to the planer to square off the tops of all of the pieces. So here are the pieces off the planer. Their edges have been planed. They're not parallel to each other, but they are 90 degrees to a reference face. So here they are. Now I worked out the order by looking at the end grain. So the end grain here shows that this is the order in which the pieces were ripped from the original board. So if I glue them all together like this, I end up with a board that's much wider at this end than it is at that one. So I'm going to turn some of the pieces around and I'll flip them over this way so that the grain orientation remains the same. So if the grain is exiting this way, flipping them around like that still has it oriented the same way, and that'll make any planing come out well. So flipping this one and this one around, it looks like I've got equal width now down the length of the board. So this is how I'm going to glue them together. So I undid the clamps and I liked what I got out of the clamps so well that I got a little bit ahead of myself and I went on to make a little shelving unit. So this is a little shelving unit for an electronics workbench. I took one of the boards and resawed it so the thin horizontal pieces that you see came out of one board. The vertical pieces came out of another board, and I used half a board resawn to make the drawer. So, how did we do in the end? Well, here's half of our yield. I ended up with 5 boards, each about this size, and I used 2.5 boards to make a small shelving unit. So, in the end, I'm pleased with what I got out of it. Now, is this a useful exercise? Well, if you're trying to make a living at woodworking, the answer is definitely no. You're far better off buying this material than making it yourself. If you're a hobbyist, it may or may not be worth your while. It could be worth your while if you want a little bit more practice with your bandsaw, squaring up material, planing edges, gluing things into laminates. But that would be the most value I think that you would get out of it. So if you have time on your hands and a woodlot to work with, sure, why not? Anyhow, that's it for me. I want to thank you for sticking it all the way through till here. And whenever you get a chance, make some time for your passion, and if you can, share it.